thanks to Sustainable Brands for inviting me here today. I'm very excited to be here in Istanbul. Now you're going to switch to a different type of English. The kind of bacon and bicycles you can hear just reveals that I'm Danish, so please bear over with my English. Great to see such a big crowd, and what I'm going to do for all you guys is kick off with a small exercise, and it's going to be really, really simple with so many professionals here in the room. Good. So what we're going to do is you're going to help me with a exercise in brand recognition. So all you're going to do is tell me what this brand stands for. So it's really, really simple. We don't have time to pass around a microphone, so just shout as loudly as you can. It's quite a recognized brand. So what does the brand Nike stand for? Anybody? Running, yes, that's a good thing. The brand spirit? Just do it, yes, the winning attitude. Great, let's take our second brand here. Coca-Cola. What does Coca-Cola stand for? There's probably some Coke folks here in the audience. Happiness, that's true. I think you have been cheating a little bit yesterday. You heard about it, so great. If you look at the value of companies today, 80% of the value is actually tied to intangible assets, such as the brand. So when people are buying people aren't buying that brown carbonated sugar water. Essentially what they're buying is that globally recognized red signature logo reading Coca-Cola. That's what people are buying. So essentially, if you look at products today, they are offering more or less the same things. It's incremental differences. But to look at the change that has happened, if we go back in 1975, it's actually quite interesting to see that back then only 17% of a company's value was tied to the brand. So in the marketplace today, it's increasingly a fight between brands. It's increasingly an advertising fight. So in other words, advertising essentially today is the tax you're paying for being irrelevant, for offering incremental products and incremental services. And exactly that brand story is being challenged today because the brand messages and the advertising messages you're putting out there, they are being challenged by people. And we heard Cedric talking about this, social media, etc. So when Cook talk about being this happiness factory, suddenly people look down at themselves and they might see Coca-Cola as the fat factory. So the stories we as brands are telling are increasingly being challenged. And if we look back at a book such as Naomi Klein wrote, the No Logo book, you might have read it, she says that a company's Achilles heel is the brand. So the days of bullshitting is really over. And Sally talked about ultra transparency. And I think if we go forward and just look at some of the tools that we as people have in our hands, let's just look at this one called Good Guide. I don't know if you have it in Turkey. It works actually best in the US market. What you can do is you can go into the supermarket and you can scan the barcode of any product, and it'll tell you how that product performs on environment, health, and society. And furthermore, you can actually see a list of ingredients and if there's any harmful ingredients in that product. When I tried it on some of the products that I use in my daily life, I actually found 3 of those products containing harmful ingredients. They can have as strong a brand as they want, but I'm not using them anymore. And if we move forward, who knows what transparency is going to bring us? I think technology is really radically changing the market space. And if we look at something like Google Glass, who knows if we can kind of go into the future and suddenly look around in the supermarket and can tell you about low carbon emission products, low calorie products. So I think the marketplace will not be so much about the saying, but it will be left to the brands that actually do stuff. But, of course, I can claim that, but how much do people really care about things like carbon emissions and animal cruelty and low calories and climate change and sustainability? How much do they really care? And if we ask consumers, and this is pretty much across market, probably 80% would say, yes, we do care. And they also think that brands are part of the problem and also think that brands should be part of the solution. But if we then look at how they actually turn those intentions into actions, it's a different story. It's only probably around, again, across markets, only about 15% that actually put their money where their mouth is. So there's a big gap. And I think that's probably why I often hear marketing directors say, customers and my clients don't care about sustainability and all, and Sally also talked a little bit about that. But I think that it's not that the marketing have changed overnight. Consumers do what they tell them if we tell them relevant stories. So I believe that it's not because consumers aren't interested in sustainability. I think it's because we're not telling interesting enough stories. And let's just put that quickly to the test. So what we're going to do, I'm going to mention a statement, and if this is something that you believe in, if this is something that rings true with you, you raise your hand and you keep it up there. So for example, if I say, are you worried about the job possibilities for your kids? You raise your hand and you keep it up there. Pretty simple, okay? Let's try that. So let's start off. How many of you are worried about the job possibilities for your kids? Hands up. Anybody worried about that? Great, okay, keep it up there, keep it up there. Who would actually like to be a little bit more fit, do a little bit more exercise? Let me see some hands. Be honest now, great, so much honesty in this room. Who worried about online security, people stealing your passwords? Let me see that. Great. Who wants to spend more time with their kids? Good, great, good parents. Who's worried about the economy? Who's worried about Turkey's economy? A lot of hands, okay. Who thinks that happiness is more important than money? And remember to keep your hands up, don't take your hands down. Who's worried about too much sugar, fat, and salt in their food? Who's worried about climate change? Great. Now take a look in the room and see what I would call a forest of hands. Keep them up there still. And I think this is because we're talking about issues that matter to people, stories that matter to people. And I hope that every marketing director in this world would see this room full of hands right now, because I think there are essential stories to tell out there. So for me, what's changing is that brands can't be self-serving anymore. They can't do their baby on roller skate stories anymore. They have to talk about things that matter to people, that looks at the difference they're making for people and planet. And this is essentially what I call Goodvertising. And I think this is really the change for brands. I think brands should be an enabler. It should be a problem solver. It should be someone that actually holds your hand and leads you to the future. So when you have your brands, I think you should look at the world and see whether there's something you can solve, where you can make a difference, instead of forcing your brand onto the world. And if you just take a quick look at some of the brands that are doing this, Sally mentioned Method earlier and their mission for cleaner cleaning, so I'm not going to tag into that one. But if we look at another brand, McDonald's, what they have done by focusing on one simple issue, they have actually increased sales. They looked at one of the most popular products, the Happy Meal, and instead of their usual plastic fantastic toys, they put in a book by a well-known children's author. So suddenly they actually got, for once, the kids off their iPads and got them to read. So they made a difference and they spoke up for something. Coca-Cola, whom you saw a presentation by yesterday, have also spoken up for recycling. I'm not going to go into that. Levis, another company, I think how they chose the issue was looking at one of the biggest threats to their business, water scarcity. And they have launched a campaign called Water Less, where they've turned out some pretty amazing innovations and where they have partnered with consumers to make a difference. And just the other day I actually read that the CEO of Levi's haven't washed his pants at all, so he's definitely living it. But this is not only something for B2C brands, it's increasingly important for B2B brands as well to find this issue that you can talk with your customers about. And if we look at a company like American Express, and this is actually the ad we see here in the middle, they're in the market to sell credit card solutions to small businesses. And they saw the small businesses were struggling in a harsh US economy and in a market where people probably tend to kind of go to the mall instead of their small local store. So what they launched was a small business Saturday. So they encouraged people to go down the local store and shop, and they made a difference for the customers, and they actually increased sales of the credit card solutions. Another brand, another B2B brand, is IBM, and you probably have seen their Smarter Planet initiative. And I think what's so brilliant about that is that they can touch on so many different issues, traffic being one of them. So they use big data to solve some of the traffic jams that I would say I experienced in Istanbul as well. So maybe we should have a bit of a big data analysis on Istanbul. But way too often I still think that when we look at sustainability, I think that brands do still walk in what I call the bullshit forest. So way too many companies cherry pick the lowest hanging sustainability issues, PET bottles, reusable shopping bags, instead of actually looking at the bigger transition and the bigger change that needs to happen, the systemic change that Sally spoke about. And I think the thing that needs to happen is that we need to stop using the same tactics and making people want things that they really don't need. I don't know how many of you kind of need a squeezable cheese on a tube bottle. I think we have to look at fulfilling needs. So this is kind of the change that needs to happen. And when Nike kind of came out with a Better World commitment, one of the things that they saw was a world with fewer resources and more people. So they wanted to use innovation to make a difference. And I don't know if anybody actually are wearing the Flyknit shoe today, because it's not everybody that knows their story. But they've actually reinvented the shoe. So instead of creating a shoe out of 37 sewn pieces, what they've done is they created almost like a knitted sock. So now there's only 2 sewn pieces going into this shoe, so a lot less labor. And if you look at the resources, they've cut dramatically down on the resources used to create this shoe, from 290 grams down to 160 grams. So they're creating massive change. And I think that brands that succeed doing this have a purpose at heart. They have it at the DNA. And I think if we should do the same brand recognition exercise we did in the beginning to say what Lifebuoy, Volvo, and Dove stands for, I'm quite sure that you'll all feel that these are brands that are passionate about some of the issues they talk about. And they are in the change business. If we look at a brand like Lifebuoy, they have actually pledged to improve basic sanitation for 1 billion people around the world. I think that's quite a bold, audacious goal. If you look at a company like Volvo, you know, those boxy Swedish cars now owned by the Chinese, what they have pledged, and I think that's quite an amazing pledge, they have said that by 2020, nobody should be seriously injured or killed in one of the cars. In 2020, that's in 6 years' time. And by doing that, by putting up that audacious goal, they've actually turned out quite a few innovations. One of them is putting an airbag in the helmet of the car in case you actually drove into someone. Beauty brand Dove, you probably all know it, taking a different stand on beauty and making women feel better about how they are and look, instead of living up to some screwed beauty ideals. So I think either one can, as a brand, stand up in a line with a lot of other brands offering irrelevant stories and incremental differences, or you can actually look at where you as a brand can make a meaningful difference in people's lives. And I think this is a story that's worth telling. More and more surveys and studies, and I think this is really, really interesting. More surveys and studies today showing that if you do this, you gain financial value and the stock market will reward you. And let me just explain that very, very quickly. Because I think that when a brand look onto the future and minimizes risks or look for new opportunities, you are future-proofing your brand. So if you're an investor and you're looking at a lot of different companies out there, you see a company that's more resilient, that's more adaptable, then it's a safer investment. So when I talk about corporate social responsibility, I quite often actually hate that word, because I think it's way too much about compliance. I think it's way too much about threats. I think if we really want to move forward, I think it's about thinking in possibilities. As just mentioned, the advertising space still, it's full of these companies offering incremental differences and quite irrelevant stories to people. It's still the roller skate babies that dominate this space. And I think in a more transparent society, and in a society where doing values more than saying, I think that brand story will be at risk. If we look at Goodvertising, this is a different way, because you're engaging with issues. We all saw this forest of hands with issues that you actually cared about. I think if you can turn that to your core brand story, then you also move from creating these silly ones to actually fulfilling people's needs. And think about all the great things you can do. If you think about Dove, they've empowered women. If you think about Volvo, they're actually taking one of our biggest killers in society, and they're challenging that and say, nobody should be killed in traffic. I think these are all amazing stories that one can tell. When Tesla, the all-electric car company, you all know Tesla, right? They launched the first Model S. Do you know how big a marketing budget they had? It was close to zero, and I think they could do that because they created a great achievement, and then people notice. And I think this is really the power of Goodvertising, because the difference you make really makes a difference, and that's a long-lasting, relevant brand story to tell. The definition of insanity is repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again, but expecting a different outcome. So I think it's about time that we do change. And not to end on a pessimistic note, because I can feel a lot of energy in this room, and I'm sure that you are about to go in the right direction. I actually want us to read these two sentences aloud together. So on 3, we're going to read, we have been part of the problem, we want to be part of the solution. Are you ready? So 1, 2, 3. We have been part of the solution. No, we have been part of the problem, we want to be part of the solution. I couldn't really hear you. Let's just try it again. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. We have been part of the problem, we want to be part of the solution. Do you think any Turkish consumers believe you? I think we need to do it a little bit louder. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. We have been part of the problem. Great, thank you.